Hello and welcome to the Big Data Debrief. It's a new video series here at Big Data Wire where I and others interview CEOs and other top executives at big data companies that are making big news. Today's guest is Clint Sharp, the CEO of Cribl, a data observability startup that has been turning heads recently and has been called the new Splunk for observability data. Thanks for joining us today, Clint.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, great. Probably there's a lot of folks out there who maybe don't know a whole lot about Cribl. So maybe you could start out and let us know a little bit about your background and why you founded the company.
Yeah, for sure. So my background is as a practitioner, actually. IT and security, the first decade of my career I spent in telecommunications, operating, large-scale networks, business systems, and gave me a, pretty deep appreciation of the problem that our customers face. I made my way out to Silicon Valley. I worked for Splunk for 5 years. We left there in 2017 and founded Cribl in 2018. And kind of the core problem that we observed is your data is growing at a 28% compound growth rate. And I've asked thousands of people whether their budget is, and I've never gotten a single yes. And so kind of the tension between data growth, cost, et cetera, kind of what got us to 2024, that sort of architectural pattern of just throwing all the data into an index and making it searchable is not what's going to get us to 2034. And so Cribl builds data processing software for IT and security professionals. We call it the data engine for IT and security. And using cloud native technology, using next generation approaches to how we process this data, we help people do a lot more with less.
Okay, great. I thought data storage, the cost per gigabyte was trending in a positive direction, but I guess it's not anywhere close to 28%. It's not enough to keep up.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? So, data storage costs do come down over time as technology improves. We call that a few percentage points a year compared to the amount of data that's being generated. The approaches that we used for the last decade were fine for the last decade, but now we really need to think more carefully about what data needs to be retained, what's the right system for that data. So our core product, Stream, that's the product we started with, helps people route data, kind of insert themselves into the middle of the stream. We focus on telemetry data, so that's logs, metrics, trace data. That helps people that run the systems that run the business troubleshoot their applications, observe their applications, secure their enterprises, and they need a portfolio of data products to do that. They may have an existing log analysis tool that uses indexing technology to make it fast to search. They probably are looking at something like a time series database to help them store large amounts of metric data. They may have a distributed tracing solution. Part of what we're helping them do is expand into having a data lake strategy that's purpose built for this class of data. So we have a new product called Cribl Lake that helps them store data very cost effectively. We have a product called Search that helps them look at vast amounts of data. And so for our customers, our larger customers are moving tens to hundreds of petabyte or terabytes of data per day. And they have petabyte to exabyte size data sets at rest. And these are very, very expensive to store. And our search product helps them go analyze that data at very, very large scale and help them retain significantly greater amounts of data. And especially in security, this is a huge problem because organizations are being asked to retain years worth of data if there was ever a breach or an investigation that they need to go back in and look through all of the old data. And so kind of all of these requirements are adding up to, customers are potentially spending tens of millions of dollars a year on these solutions and looking for ways to do more with less, as I said earlier.
You said that the companies are being asked to store all of their old data?
Well, years worth, and generally it's any type of log data that's emitted anywhere in the enterprise. That could be data from their endpoint detection. That could be things like network flow logs, firewall logs. They're being asked to retain this by auditors and regulators in the event that, and think about this from the context of just normal cybersecurity operations. When you determine that something bad has happened, you don't usually find out about that a day after it happened or the day it happened. You often find out about it 9 months, a year, 15 months after the incident. And so if you want to forensically understand, what's their lateral movement? Did an attacker make it into my network? Did they move onto other systems? You need incredibly high fidelity data that's retained for that time period, because you can't ask questions of data that you have not retained.
Wow, that's a lot of data. Um, so what is your core philosophy for enabling that data observability? What do you do differently or better than other companies in the space?
Yeah, so we're in the observability space. Just to clarify a little bit, like data observability is some more like helping me understand where the data is moving.
Okay.
Observability, the practice is, hey, I want to be able to ask questions of my data that I may not have planned in advance, and so I need to be able to see, did was Clint's experience with this application good? If you think about the modern post-digital transformation world, I'm old enough that whenever I used to travel for business and you need to make a change, you called somebody. Nobody calls anybody anymore. They open up the app, they go make a change. If the experience with that app is poor, then my feelings on the brand of the company that I'm interacting with is potentially at risk. Like everybody needs to have a good experience. I need a vast amount of data in order to understand every user's experience. And so that's part of why this data is growing so quickly. And then
Hmm.
from a security perspective, it's as I mentioned earlier, which is that I need this very, very high fidelity data to be able to look forensically at what may have happened to my systems. And this amount of data is orders of magnitude larger than business data, which is what's driving so much of the cost. And organizations are looking at, like, they don't have to know my stat around data growth. They can see it in how much money they're spending. So every year they're going back to the well, and these solutions that they have already purchased are getting 25% more expensive. And they start drawing the line of, okay, well, if I keep making it 25% more expensive year over year over year, in 5 years, this is going to be more than the budget I have today. So I have to do something. And this is kind of where we come in. We help them route data to more cost effective destinations. We help them eliminate noise and waste with that data, filter out unused events, unused fields in those events. We help them analyze data using serverless technologies, which separates storage and compute, so they can only pay for the analysis when they're actually running it. So all of these kind of next generation approaches to data processing, specifically in IT and security, as part of what's enabled us to as a customer's first company, to go address their problems and grow so incredibly quickly.
Okay. And where does Cribl draw the line in terms of what capabilities you're providing? Is it infrastructure? Is it routing data? Or do you actually provide them the tools to be able to analyze the data too?
Yep. So we have a full data processing suite for this class of IT and security data, telemetry data more specifically today. So we have data collection, that's called Cribl Edge. We have data analysis, that's Cribl Search. We have Cribl Lake, which allows them to store that data. But what's very different about us is we are an open company. We provide products that integrate with other products. So our Stream and Edge products, for example, have over 70 different sources and destinations that you can send data. So when you put Stream in the middle of your existing logging ingestion pipeline, now not only can you send that data to the place it was going originally, but you can also send that data to dozens of other systems. And enterprises, they have a portfolio of tools that they're using to analyze all this data. One vendor is not going to be able to give them everything that they need. And so different teams have different tools. And kind of where we do draw the line as of right now, and that's not to say it'll be this way forever, but we are providing them data routing, data analysis, but we're not providing them, for example, their SIM tool. We're not providing them a APM tool. So you could certainly conceive building those types of products on top of our engine. But as of today, we are building data processing software and not those solutions. We partner with others to help our customers, get data into those solutions.
So it sounds like it's a lot about shrinking the size of the data, right? Why can't we just Why can't we just compress this data better, right? Shouldn't that be possible?
Well, it already is compressed generally.
Right.
Compression being, thinking gzip or, et cetera. So the data usually is already compressed before it's stored. Even compressed, it's huge.
Right.
And the many of the vendors that they're utilizing to, observe and secure their enterprise, uh, their prices are a function of data volume, whether their licensing metric is that or not. If they charge on compute, if they charge on storage, if they charge on ingestion, it doesn't really matter what the metric is they pick to charge on. The
Hmm.
amount of data that you send into these tools are going to drive the cost. And so if you're sending data into those tools that's not providing value, and I think that's one of the kind of key insights and one of the dirty secrets in sort of IT and security solutions, uh, not all that data is valuable. And the people who produce the data that goes in there, these are cloud vendors, firewall vendors, EDR vendors, or custom applications as well. So developers on the inside of organizations, their incentive is, once again, you can't ask questions of data you don't have. So when they're instrumenting their applications or when they're producing security log type of information, they're putting everything into that log data that any customer might ever want. But most customers do not need all of that data in order to secure their enterprise or observe their application performance. And so by processing that data in the middle or at its origination point with our Edge product, we help customers get rid of fields that don't matter. We help them eliminate events. So an example in firewall type of data, when a session starts and a session ends, you're going to get a message for start and end. I really
Hmm.
only need the end message in order to operate my SIM type platform. So I can eliminate half the data off the top just by eliminating a whole class of messages. And those messages have 50 fields that describe what each one of those flows are, but I only need, let's say, 20 of them in order to secure my enterprise. So by eliminating all of that extra information that's going into these tools, there's potentially massive amounts of savings. But there's also a question of, well, what if I ended up needing that data?
Hmm.
There are more cost-effective places to put this data, like a data lake. You can just put data in object storage and S3 and blob storage. And so by having kind of the routing tier in the middle, we can tee off the full fidelity data, go put that someplace cheap. We can always replay that data later, or we can analyze it with our search product in place. And so this allows them to get exactly the same, observability or security posture that they had before, because we've eliminated the less valuable data. And they still get to maintain the full fidelity data. So this is back to kind of what got you to 2024 won't get you to 2034. These
Hmm.
kind of new architectural paradigms like a telemetry pipeline, like a data lake, like a federated search and analysis solution that we're providing, give people next generation capabilities that just did not exist in the market before Cribl.
Great. So I guess compared to 2014, obviously we're collecting a lot more data at this point. Wouldn't it be a better approach maybe to just stop generating all this extra data that nobody needs? Or is that asking too much of the folks who are developing these products that are emitting all this sensor data?
Well, I think it's a question of incentives, right? So somebody might need that data,
Mm.
and there's should every vendor who produces data provide like rich granular controls for giving users the ability to change what gets output? I mean, quite possibly. Is that the most important feature that their customers are asking for? I don't know, but most of them do not. And so the incentive, as I said earlier, for the developer that writes the logging information that comes out or the metric information that comes out is to make sure that their customers have all the information they need in order to operate and secure their enterprises. And so it really does. That's why we end up with needing a piece in the middle,
Mhm.
is because as a good example. So for years, I've worked with very large enterprises, and invariably they'll end up with kind of this enterprise logging project, and they'll say, "Hey, we need to standardize in our custom applications all the logging information that comes out. We needed to have these fields. We need these types of events to be emitted." And but they probably may have 300, 500 custom applications, and so those projects very rarely see their way to completion because they have more important priorities than to go update all of their logging information. They have features they need to deliver to the business. Whereas you
Mhm.
can solve that same problem with our stream product in the middle. We can help normalize all of that information. We can help enrich it and enhance it so that the information that they need. We can help them restructure it from legacy formats into nice structured logs today. So the should they? Yeah, probably. It would in an ideal world. We would have the emitters of this data would have rich granular controls for controlling all of this, but in practice that just generally doesn't exist, and it isn't the most pressing problem that they're being asked to solve.
Okay. It's interesting that it's going up so quickly, right? I imagine that's a function of just there's a lot more applications that people are using, and the developers are just like you said, they're opting to turn on, you know, uh, logging for every possible feature, right?
Well, there's more. There's a number of macro trends that I think are impacting this. In the cloud, we see a lot more information being emitted. And part of it is you're running it on somebody else's computer, so you need a lot more information in order to feel good about how it's operating and how it's secured. Things like just in general digital transformation. Workflows and processes that used to be done by phone calls are now done by apps and applications and in-house software. And we haven't really gotten deeply into any sort of AI trends yet, but this is already a well-documented problem that, given the amount of just sheer English that can be produced by LLMs, we haven't even gotten into the implications of machine-to-machine communication. There is a rise in the amount of data that's being produced globally, and we're talking primarily about telemetry data, but just think about the amount of data that you as a human have produced. So, I was born in 1980, and for the first 20 years of my life, 25 years of my life, for the most part, every photo that exists of me is in a shoebox somewhere.
Mhm.
Uh, in the last 10 years, I have thousands upon thousands of images that I have generated. And that's just one example of what digitization has done in terms of just the amount of information that's being produced. And that trend is not going to, I don't think, decrease. If anything, it will accelerate.
Okay. In terms of where's the best place to store this stuff? I mean, usually it's been databases are the place for logs, metrics, and traces. Is the database just on its way out because it can't handle the size of this data anymore? What infrastructure do you think is the best? What architecture for managing this data?
Yeah, so the 2010s saw the evolution of kind of three different types of data stores for this data. Each class of data kind of gets its own. The 2000s, we were kind of just throwing this all into databases, as you mentioned. And then in the 2010s, we started to see the evolution of multiple different types of specialized databases that help store and analyze all this data. So you have time series databases, things like Prometheus, Grafana, Mimir. Datadog has its own proprietary time series database behind its metric products. You had sort of log indexing solutions, Splunk, Elastic. Again, Datadog has one here. CrowdStrike has acquired one called LogScale. Traces, you had yet another kind of tracing data store that was built for companies like ServiceNow acquired Lightstep. They had a proprietary data store. SignalFx and Splunk have one. Um, and then you started to see sort of the emergence of just storing data in object storage like S3. That's been sort of the last probably 5 to 10 years. Is okay. Well, that storage is very, very cheap. Now, the downside of that is it's been very difficult to analyze data that's just put into object storage. And that's part of what makes our search product so unique and different, is that it enables you to search that data in place in S3 without having to move it back to a logging store or a metric store, as I was talking about. And I think you'll start to see the emergence of kind of multimodal databases. And we have a product that'll be coming out within the next 6 months or so that'll enable very, very fast analytical query on top of all three of those classes of data kind of converged into the same type of data store. So we saw the fragmentation of those data stores in the 2010s. I think you'll start to see the consolidation of those data stores where you'll have kind of a data lake, which allows kind of cheap but slow query, and then, kind of a faster caching tier or a faster caching database that enables kind of analytics on nearer term data. So it kind of depends on there's a lot of different types of databases for a lot of different specific workloads. And I think we will see a consolidation of some of that into being able to store your logs in the same place as your traces, is the same place as your metrics. But that's probably a trend for the next 5 years. I don't think it's quite arrived yet, but it's coming.
I mean, it seems like we ought to be able to just put all of this data on S3 and analyze it there, right? Is that just not going to be possible in terms of how quickly people want answers when they go to analyze it?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. I mean, the for some performance, you need to have the compute and the data, tightly coupled. Like, I need it in RAM. I need it on a fast disk sitting right next to a processor, which can go answer that question. If I want to answer a question in milliseconds, this is the only architecture which will enable you to get answers that fast. If I'm willing to wait seconds for those answers, then yes, we can have the storage and compute separated. Separating storage and compute provides massive cost and scaling advantages. The storage is going to be cheaper. The compute can be, serverless and elastic and only be there whenever we have questions to be answered. But the performance is never going to be anywhere near what the performance of having a server with a piece of software that has access to fast disk and can store data in RAM and can query the data that's co-located with it. And so, depending on the requirements for which data needs to have very, very fast response times, which data can accept slower query response times. That's how we think about the problem at Cribl and the facilities that we're providing to our customers, is the data management technology that gives them the ability to make those choices, so that it's going to be more expensive to get fast answers to your queries. What percentage of your data needs that? If it doesn't need that, then you should put it in the cheaper option. And this is the way in which we balance the capabilities and give them kind of the rich data management technology that enables them to meet the needs of their business in the most cost effective way.
I know in the analytics space, with things like data lakehouses, the trend is to, disaggregate the data storage and the processing, right? And put a lot of this data into S3, and then have things like Presto or Trino, as kind of the query engine to go after that. That trend is not slowing down in general data analytics. Is it just the nature of this log data that makes that not really feasible to do in
Well,
the
I
in
think we're
this
saying the
space?
same thing,
Yep.
which is where you're seeing things like kind of Iceberg and Delta Table or Delta Lake, etc. Uh, those are things for which I have the tolerance that it's going to take possibly twice the time to get the answer back than it would have if I had it loaded in something that looks more like a cloud data warehouse, right?
Mhm.
So, and these are the trade-offs that customers are making. The cloud data warehouse isn't going anywhere. I mean, Snowflake's business is excellent. You see them expanding into kind of federated query and Iceberg and storing data in external tables. Customers are demanding it. They're demanding being able to have that data stored in open formats, but the performance of that is going to be half or less what it was, having the data tightly coupled, where there's a machine that you stand up that has the data local co-resident, and you can go query that data very quickly. And then the customer in the same space as I'm talking about, the same stuff that we're talking about, the customers are choosing based off the performance requirements what kind of cost profile they want for those classes of data.
So we're not getting anywhere close to having any type of Goldilocks storage product for this, where you can have the best of all worlds. You still have to make trade-offs, it sounds like.
Yeah, always. I mean, everything in software engineering and software in general is all about trade-offs. And uh, anybody who says they have the one size fits all solution should probably not believe their own marketing.
I think that's probably really good advice. What is your take on OTel as a standard for logs, metrics, and traces? Is this a good thing for the industry?
I think it's a good thing for the industry. I think the what I have been observing with OpenTelemetry, one is that it's been, you'll hear things like it's the most contributed to aside from Kubernetes project and the CNCF, and all those things are true. I see a lot of adoption in kind of the tracing ecosystem. I don't see nearly as much in the metrics and logging ecosystem. I think it's good technology, but what I'm seeing is rather than it being an open source thing that customers are going to go run, what we're seeing is instead it's an open source thing that each vendor is turning into their own distribution. So think back to like the Hadoop days where you've got three different similar looking but somewhat incompatible distributions of the exact same piece of software, or think OpenStack from before that, where kind of every vendor has their own open telemetry distribution, and the value proposition that you were going to get this open thing that like with just a configuration change you could just easily swap between one vendor to another. I don't think that reality is going to come to pass.
Mhm.
You do get that with our products. That is a huge value proposition of what Cribl's open products like Stream and Edge give you, is the ability to, with a flip of a switch, transition from vendor to vendor. But we're starting to include in the next couple of versions of Cribl Stream different OTel destinations, one for each vendor, that allow you to adapt sort of their proprietary schema additions and things that are different between the different implementations. Because customers are, they deployed one vendor's OTel agent, but now they want to try another vendor. That's an actual use case that we're being deployed for, even though that was the original promise of open telemetry. So I think it's commoditizing the amount of engineering investment that vendors are having to make to build agents and APM like instrumentation. But I don't think that it's something that customers are going to get directly, and then get that easy, switching value proposition. It just does not appear to be moving that way.
Okay, well, it sounds like whether OTel succeeds as becoming a standard or not, it sounds like you're going to be pretty well positioned regardless.
Yeah, I mean, our position is always like meet the customer where they are. So
Mhm.
as a customer's first, always that's our number one value here at Cribl. We I observe what I observe, and we as a company observe what we observe in terms of where the market trends are going. We want to support the customers, and if they want to standardize on open telemetry, that's great. I just see a lot more people talking about it still in the future tense, 3 to 5 years after we started talking about open telemetry, like they're going to have an open telemetry strategy, as opposed to a lot of people being on the backside of that and saying like, I've deployed this across my entire enterprise. Open telemetry is now the standard whereby which I collect all of my information. I just haven't seen a lot of examples of that.
Yeah. Um, I've heard that SIEM products are on their way out, right? And XDR, or extended detection response products, are the path forward for security. Would you care to comment on that? Is that the reality?
I mean, I think people have been saying SIM was dead for 20 years, so I'm not, call me a skeptic, that
Mhm.
that's in some way, magically disappearing. Um, I don't think XDR ever really materialized, and I'm not sure that anybody ever really knew what XDR meant, to be quite honest. Like, XDR was sort of like, well, it's my thing that kind of does what a SIM does, but it's not fully a SIM yet, so I'm going to call it XDR. Was always kind of how I felt about XDR across a bunch of different vendors who were kind of coming into that space. Looking at kind of the messaging coming out of RSA this year, I didn't see nearly as much XDR talk as I saw in the years prior, and so I think you can still see vendors saying they're going to offer some kind of XDR solution, but even some of the ones that were calling themselves XDR, I noticed are now branding themselves SIM. So like I think there's an evolution of what is a SIM. I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of new players in the space with some new approaches that are super interesting. But I don't think that as a category is going away anytime soon. For the most part, everybody I know that we talk to, has one. What I think is an interesting trend, and I was just talking with some colleagues about this earlier today. I was in New York earlier this week, and I visit customers as often as I can. The the common trend that I see is that nobody's exactly sure where they're going to. Like they don't know what the SIM vendor of the future is for them, but they seem to all almost universally be going somewhere else.
Hmm.
So moving from vendor A to vendor B, I saw literally every combination in my conversations over the last couple of weeks that everybody's moving from some SIM vendor to some other SIM vendor. So I think there's a reasonable amount of dissatisfaction in the space in terms of what they're getting and the value they're getting and how much money they're spending. And there's a lot of movement, to Azure Sentinel, Google SecOps, CrowdStrike Next Gen SIEM, like a lot of these kind of smaller players. There's a lot of movement, but still Splunk too. So there's a lot of people, moving from other products, still over to Splunk. So they're still winning a pretty healthy amount of business. So it's really interesting. There's a lot more movement this year, from SIM to SIM than I've seen, over the last, 5-6 years of doing this here at Cribl.
Yeah, cybersecurity pros need good power tools to be able to combat the hackers and the malware. And it feels like we're slipping, and maybe the bad guys are winning in the tools. I mean, they have to get better, right? We need to integrate AI into these security tools more effectively. And like you said, people aren't really happy, with their SIEM tools at this point. So what's the future going to be there? How are we going to stay in front of the bad guys?
I mean, it's a constant arms race, and it has been for the entire duration of my career. Because I mean, we could say, Gen AI is the next leap forward in terms of the detection side of the business, but the attackers have it too. And so, with all security tooling, it's always an arms race. Like the bad guys are advancing, the good guys build better detections. I think certainly the being able to sift signal from noise is kind of the biggest area where I think people are going to be investing and need to be investing, in that it nearly 100% of the time when something bad happens, there was an alert somewhere. Like some system detected something unusual, but they also detected 1,000 other unusual things that weren't important. And the one important thing, ends up kind of flying under the radar. So the helping people, find the true problems that are actually true security threats, that's always what people in the space are aiming for. And I think there's a lot of great progress, at least internally. We've come to rely heavily on our CSPM solution as a way to take a look at kind of our threat landscape, our posture, our general policies, and where we can try to make things as tight as possible. And that's a relatively recent advancement in the last 5 years that really didn't exist 5 years ago. I think the SIM vendors continue to innovate in terms of giving faster response and automation capabilities. So there's a lot of goodness. There's a lot of goodness happening, but there's also a lot of noise. And by noise, I don't just mean alert volume. I mean a lot of noise from a lot of vendors in terms of what do we need. And so the job of a CISO and a security operations center has never been more difficult in terms of trying to figure out what they need in order to best secure their enterprise.
Yeah, it's a scary world out there. Last question. You recently raised $319 million venture capital money at a $3.5 billion valuation. What does that say about the work you've done so far to build Cribl and the opportunity in front of the company?
So I go back to my customers first, always value, which is, all of our, rapid growth and huge success comes on the backs of providing value to customers. And I think that we have some really great products. We have really great people. Another thing I say all the time is software is a people business, and it's not a technology business, it's a people business. And so, every interaction that you have with a company needs to be top notch, from the people who sell the product to you, support it, the people all the way down to, what do our contracts look like and how do we invoice you and everything. And so Cribl has the best people in the business. And I come to work excited every single day because of the great work of our employees. And we have fantastic customers for whom, we have a contract that we're providing value, and they continue to grow their business with us because of the value that we're providing to them. And I think the fundraising rounds are a nice opportunity to sit there and reflect on a milestone of what we've achieved. But we have so much more to do and so much more to grow and so much more new value to provide to customers that we've had some great progress over the last 6 years, but I'm excited for the next decade to come.
All right, great. Well, I can't wait to see what you guys do next. Well,
Well,
yeah,
it's a
thanks for joining
a
us.
pleasure to talk to you today.
Yeah, it was nice to talk to you, Clint. Thanks for joining the show.